Alrighty, so we've given the stragglers enough time to get on, and they'll just have to miss the introductions if they hop on now. So with that, my name is Jason Sandys. I work for Catapult Systems, and we're going to launch into desktop deployment. Planning mainly is kind of the focus of this, although as many of you may or may not know, you probably do know, Windows 7 is a huge topic. And of course, deploying it is almost as huge of a topic as Windows 7 is itself, because you have to consider all of those things that are in Windows 7 to actually successfully get it out to all of your users, whoever they may be. So thank you all for joining us. Please, everyone is on mute right now, so go ahead and use the Q&A functionality of Live Meeting to funnel questions to me. And I'll be happy to answer those, probably at the end, but if something really important or interesting comes up, then I'll definitely pause and grab those during the middle. We don't have a whole lot of time scheduled, so I'm going to try to get through all this material as best I can. And really this should mainly be a tickler for everyone, right? There's like I said, there's so much material, there's no way we could ever get to everything and every detail that everybody's going to want to know. So this is just kind of a ramp-off point, somewhere to get people started thinking about these kind of things, maybe get some light bulbs to go off. So here's kind of a quick agenda. These are kind of three main bullet points that Microsoft puts out there a lot, kind of definitely not a formal plan, right, for getting Windows 7 going in any environment, but they're just kind of high-level bullet points to start categorizing some of the activities for deploying Windows 7 and getting Windows 7 up and in the organization. So the first one was the compatibility, analysis, and mitigation there. So really this is about knowing what's in your environments. Most environments, no matter how small, always have some little weird unknown thing, whether it be an application that Joe down the hall uses that he can't live without, that you never knew about because it just kind of works, or whether it be some weird connection that, maybe finance has to some vendor. It could be some weird vendor connection. And all of those things are things that can definitely trip you up when you deploy. So figuring out what the unknowns are in your environment is as important as figuring out what all the knowns are. So even though you may know that, yeah, we have Windows XP across our desktops, that's a great knowledge point, but how many Windows XP systems do you actually have? How many desktops? Most organizations that I walk into will give me a number of what they think they have, and then everyone else in the room will chime in with, oh, what about those systems? Oh, what about those systems? What about the ones on the factory floor? What about the ones in the warehouse? What about, all of the different ones that they have? And at the end, they'll come up with some number. And by the time we're finished with any type of client-centric engagement, we discover it's usually 10 to 15% less than what they thought, just because there's just no way for them to keep track of it in larger organizations. Even in smaller organizations, right, 10% isn't as big of a number, but 10% is still a number of PCs that they didn't know either existed or just don't exist anymore, and they don't even really know where they went. So figuring all of those things out beforehand is really key. The old saying, or I don't know how old it really is, but you don't know what you don't know, and those are the things that are going to bite you. But you can't go forward to your boss, you can't go forward to the CFO or CIO or whoever you work for and say, well, I didn't know that, so I couldn't plan for it. Well, that's just a really bad answer, and that's going to cause you to lose definitely a lot of face with whoever that person is, and depending upon the impact of what you didn't know, may cause you to lose your job. So Microsoft has put forth a lot of tools, a couple of free tools that we'll talk a little bit more about, those first two on the list right there, and actually helping you get these kind of things done. So the next is the deployment, implementation, and migration. So actually, once you figure out all those things that are in your environment, now what do you do about it? How do I get to Windows 7, right? Because, yeah, knowing is half the battle. But the other half is getting it out there, making sure that your users have that experience that they want. So, as much as we all loathe users at times, they are obviously the reason that we're all here, and we have to really make sure that their lives are the ones that are easiest at the end of the day, because typically they're the ones bringing in the money, and they're the ones that are making sure that we have a job at the end of the day. So, they're our customers. So we have to make sure that their data is there. We have to make sure that the operating system performs in a performant way so that, they're not having hang-ups, so that antivirus isn't kicking in the middle of the day and causing our users to essentially all get up and go for a coffee break because they all know that antivirus scan is running right now. And there's definitely some tools there. There's some free tools to help us get Windows 7 out on the desktop, and also there's some essentially the enterprise tools there, and that being all the System Center components to help get it to Windows 7. The last phase is actually, wow, these two slides are actually backwards. This phase comes before the other one. So this is actually, the imaging strategy. So when we're going with deploying Windows 7, the image is still the way to do it. So anyone who's familiar with Windows 7 deployment or any Windows deployment, the image is traditionally the way that folks do that. And so that is a way to package up all of Windows 7, all of those things that are in that operating system, applications, settings, and of course the operating system itself, and then make that portable so that we can essentially clone that image or that reference system where we built that image so everyone has an identical system at the end of the day as far as the operating system goes. And there's tools there from Microsoft also, so getting familiar with what those offerings are is a huge part of getting Windows 7 out on the desktop, because you have to know the ins and outs of those so you know what you can do and maybe what you can't do at the end of the day. So, there's always a lot of nice to have things, things like, location awareness. One of the common requests that I used to hear, I don't hear so much anymore, is, well, these users over here, that printer is really close to their desk. So I want those users to print to that printer automatically without them having to have any intervention. And you're like, okay, well, so how does the computer know that that printer is closest to their desk? And at that point, you kind of get dumb looks, and they're like, well, shouldn't it know? And it's like, no, how can it know, right, unless I send some type of signal across the wire. So those are that's definitely an example, a fairly concrete example of things that you can't really do, or traditionally you can't do. There actually is a little bit of a solution for that in Windows 7 called location-aware printing. So maybe you didn't know that, right? And so that's another piece of this whole bundle here, is not only figuring out your environment, but figuring out what Windows 7 can do and what it can't do, and how that relates to your environment. So things in your environment, obviously, are the models, the hardware pieces that are in your environment. Who your vendor is. Is your vendor supporting Windows 7? So all the top-tier vendors, obviously are, but maybe you have some of those older models that aren't going to support Windows 7, at least not by the book, from your actual hardware vendor. Or maybe you do have some older models that are supported, but you have to go out and get BIOS upgrades. So how many of those do you have? Once again, kind of going back to that, discovering all of those things in your environment. And a lot of those you probably don't know offhand. So maybe you do have an exact number of Windows XP systems in your environment. Maybe you know exactly how many are there. But can you tell me which ones have video cards that aren't compatible? Can you tell me which ones have applications that aren't compatible with Windows 7? And most likely there's unless you've already gone through some of this homework, there's no way that you can tell me any of those kind of things. And really, it's not me, right? At the end of the day, it's about telling yourself so you know what work you have ahead of you to get Windows 7 properly rolled out into your organization. The second half there of that slide, is the software. So, we definitely, hardware is pretty easy to see. Most people don't realize there's going to be application compatibility issues. Things like, maybe that you have that old Windows 95 application, and it's kind of funny to say, but I have run across a few organizations that have a couple of those still sitting out there. And for the most part, they still work. They're real simple, no big deal. But are you sure it's going to work, right? And so you want to be sure before you actually roll that user who's using that application, before you roll them over to Windows 7. And what about Internet Explorer? So, a lot of folks are definitely relying on web services these days, whether internal or externally hosted. Are those web services, or actually the web pages that those web services are serving up, are they compatible with IE8? Right? You can't go backwards in Windows 7. There's no downgrade option as far as Internet Explorer goes. So what are you going to do if you do discover that critical website, that time tracking application or, that inventory application or whatever it is out there? What are you going to do at that point in time? Of course, you can't figure out what you're going to do until you figure out that you have those issues in your environment. And so that's really where the first couple of tools come in. But in addition to, figuring those things out, these are, things that are currently in your environment. How are you going to handle all the new coolness, the new ramped up features that are in Windows 7? So this is just kind of a high-level descriptor of all the different ones that are in Windows 7, new things that a lot of people haven't had before and haven't even heard of. So these are things that you need to go investigate. How am I going to handle these in the organization? What am I going to say to a user that comes to me and says, hey, I want to, encrypt my USB drive, or hey, I saw this feature somewhere called BitLocker, and I enabled it on my laptop, and what are you going to tell those things to those users? So it's not just about, moving what you have today forward to Windows 7 and managing it like you're still managing it in Windows XP. You really have to figure out all these new things. One of the new ones that came out in Vista, and I know most people didn't go to Vista, so most people haven't actually had to deal with it. It's not really listed on here. It's kind of part of that secure platform piece, but not really. Is UAC. So it's kind of the big, ugly monster in the room. So what are you going to do about UAC? Do you even know what UAC does? So I think that's really a first question, and it's part of that discovery. If you don't know what UAC does, a lot of people and the scuttle around the web for a long time is, oh, that's a piece of junk, just turn it off, right? We don't need that, it's annoying. Well, that's a bad answer in my book, right? If something's annoying, that doesn't mean you turn it off. It's annoying for a reason, and if you really start peeling back the covers of UAC, Microsoft designed it to be annoying for a specific reason. And if you don't know those kind of things, now you've just lost out on a huge piece of functionality that offers a lot also. So it's about researching all of these features, knowing what they do, and how they're going to plug in with your enterprise and your environment as a whole, and not just making arbitrary decisions because you felt like turning it off, or you didn't think that the users were going to like it, right? So, and I guess that's an important point there too, is it's not just about what you feel about the feature and what your research leads you to believe. Convene some user groups. Figure it out. Go to the users themselves. Demo the features to them. Ask them, hey, how is this going to impact you? Is this going to make your life easier? Is this going to be overly burdensome? Because at the end of the day, right, if you roll these things out and you've made that decision based upon your knowledge, and you get 20 calls, 1,000 calls, depending upon the size of your organization, to the help desk, the next day after you enable or disable some feature, you probably are going to take a hit for that. Your boss is going to be coming, the senior VP is going to be coming, whoever's going to be coming, standing at your desk saying, why'd you do this, without actually figuring out what impact it's going to have. So, user groups are great for these kind of things and figuring those kind of those impacts out so you can prevent all of those millions of help desk calls. We all kind of laugh at user education. And I think it's a bad thing to laugh at user education. We all put things out, and we all know that users in general don't read those kind of things. One of the reasons I feel that users don't read those kind of things is because they see IT as being dictatorial. That we just dictate everything to them and say, oh, this is the way it's going to be. But if we get them involved and have them make decisions and have them understand that their input is valuable, I think that the user education can go a long way. And so not every time they get that little pop-up are they making that help desk call. Because that's, one of the most annoying things in the world is, oh, I got this little pop-up, and, the answer is, well, did you read it? No, right? And that's typically an answer from a user. Or, hey, I got this error message. Well, what error message? Well, I don't know. It was just some error message. Well, that doesn't help. But if you get the users involved and make them an active participant, granted, it's a big want, and that kind of goes all back into this, right? If they see these things on their menus, if they see these things happening, or if you're giving them features that they want, and you know that they want because you've convened these focus groups, you've gotten direct input from them, then Windows 7 is going to be that much more successful in your organization. So the first tool from Microsoft that's going to help you discover a lot of these things in your organization is called the Microsoft Assessment and Planning Toolkit. This is a free tool, so that's a definite stress point right there, that it's completely free. There's a lot of good documentation on it. It's a pretty simple and straightforward tool to use. It's agent-less, so you don't need to install anything on any systems in your organization, and it will essentially go out and scan everything. You obviously need to have some permissions. We don't have to have permissions, right? But the more permissions that the tool has, the more information it's going to come back and give you. And of course, there's an assumption of network connectivity, right? It can't connect to things that aren't connected to your network. But it's going to go out and it's going to find all of your Windows systems. It'll actually find any Linux systems that you have and give a minimum level of information on those. So it's really this complete discovery tool for all the different systems that are in your organization and telling you things about those systems. Now, if it's a Windows system, it can actually, with privileges, get in and tell you a lot more things. And so I have a sample report from, let's see here. Nope, that's the wrong one. Let me click back. Oh, no, that is the right one. No, that isn't. So this is actually, here we go. Here's an Excel spreadsheet that MAP actually spits out. So in addition to it inventorying, right, reporting is a huge piece of it. So you don't just want it to collect data and then never give you the data back. So this is a spreadsheet that MAP will spit out. This is one of many. There's a whole bunch of different ones, but this one is specifically a Windows 7 recommended ready computers after hardware upgrades. So that's what this tab is called. But this is, in general, a Windows 7 readiness or assessment. And this is actually from a real client. To my knowledge, all identifying information has been taken out of it. Not a huge client, as you can see by the numbers there. But still, nonetheless, it's given me good hard numbers of everything that it could see on the network and factual numbers. And so I can actually have real data to go by. So that tab that I was on has some interesting information there. So memory, what to do about the memory. Hey, I need to upgrade this guy here. I need to upgrade him to a gig of RAM instead of leaving him where he is. We need to free up some hard disk space. We want to add a DVD. So these are actual recommendations. There's another tab down here, the device summary. So it actually tells us all the different hardware pieces that are in our network. So here we have some modems here, right? Are they or are they not Windows 7 compatible based upon what the manufacturer or vendor has to say? You know, some CD-ROM drives, here's a printer. So any and every device connected to our Windows systems is going to go into the spreadsheet also. There's also the client assessment. So every one of the systems in our environment, some basic type things here. So, this is something that you could probably write a script to grab this kind of information for. But why? Microsoft has this great free tool that's dumping it all out for you. So really some great pieces there. But that's just an Excel spreadsheet. That's great for you and me most likely. Well, what about your boss? So in addition to that, there we go. It spits out a nice Word document, perfectly formatted, has this nice little executive overview, gives a nice, lots of canned text in here about Windows 7 in general. And then it also puts in the data from that Excel spreadsheet, essentially, or what it collected based upon your organization. So it's generic, but it's also, specific to your environment. I had a quick question on the latest version of MAP, and the question was, is 5.0 the latest? And the answer to that is no. 5.6 was released in, I want to say June, so not too long ago, like 4 or 5 months ago. So 5.6 is definitely the latest version that you want to get if you go looking for this on the internet, and pretty easy to find if you go to your favorite search engine, i.e. Bing. Then you'll find that pretty quickly and easily. All right, so that's a great tool. Like I said, it's easy to, you can definitely, delegate that off to a junior staff member, and they shouldn't have too many issues getting that up and running, and it's probably a great learning experience for them too. And even if you're not going to Windows 7 today, or maybe you've already gone to Windows 7, you can still use this tool. There's reports in there for servers, for virtualization, for Office. So there's some great stuff in there. Like I said, you could probably get this done, if you sat down and scripted it all out for a year, if you're a script kiddie or, you have some programming experience. But why? This is a great free tool from Microsoft. The next kind of piece here, the next free tool, so another piece to stress there, is the Application Compatibility Toolkit. ACT is exactly what it says it is. It's about managing your applications in your environment. If you figure out all of those different applications in your environment, now you can go and do something about them. So kind of like Map, it goes out and figures out all the applications in your environment. Unlike Map, it is agent-based, so you actually need an agent. It's not a resident agent, but it is something that's going to run on all of your systems, and it's going to collect all the information in your environment about all the applications that you have. So there's some high-level bullet points right there. And yeah, it does have reporting in it. Actually, I have a screenshot on the next slide. So this is a little bit difficult to demo just because you need to have some live data. But it collects all the information. So on this screenshot, it only has Microsoft applications, but it's definitely not limited to Microsoft applications. But it goes out and based upon what information it pulls back, it bangs that up against a database that it has on the back end and says, yeah, either the vendor, so in this case Microsoft, because these are all Microsoft applications, says that this application is good. Or you can see here the Microsoft Office Communicator about a third of the way down, the 2005, it's not compatible, and the vendor says that it's not compatible. The additional piece in there is there's the community assessment column there, and that's actually feedback from other folks that are using the application compatibility toolkit. So that's a cool piece there also, because now you're not just relying on the vendor. In this case, Microsoft, you can be pretty confident in what Microsoft has to say. But maybe there's some third parties out there that say, yeah, our application's good. Or maybe there's some applications out there where, the vendor hasn't said anything or hasn't contributed anything to the database. But other folks in the community have and said, yeah, we haven't had any issues with this. So it's kind of that double-edged, or, more information is always better as far as that goes. This one's pretty easy to use also, and it definitely spits out some reports out of this. This is the main piece to use, and what it helps you do is pare down those applications. So in most organizations, you really don't realize how many applications you have. And of course, you don't want to go through and test. Let's say you come up with 3,000 applications, which isn't unheard of for, a lot of organizations, even smaller organizations. But do you really want to go through and test 3,000 applications? That's a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of expertise that most folks do not have in-house. So you don't want to have to go through any of that. But this tool right here can help you eliminate hopefully 75, 80% of those applications, maybe more, from you even having to test them, because the vendor says, yeah, they're good, yay, verily. And or you're going to get community feedback saying, yeah, we haven't had any issues. So you can eliminate those applications right off the bat and say, we don't have to test them. And this is the smaller, hopefully much, much smaller subset of applications that we're actually going to have to test. And those applications you find that do have issues, ACT has a whole a set of functionality to correct some of those issues. So there are certain legacy applications that ask for version numbers of the operating system specifically. So if the application was coded poorly and is looking for, let's say, Windows 6.0 exactly, well, that's not going to run on Windows 7 because Windows 7 is 6.1. But the ACT can cause the operating system to lie to the application and say, yeah, I'm version 6.0. So you can go ahead and run, and then the application's happy and runs perfectly fine. It's just, some short-sighted programmers or some coding errors crept in there. And so the ACT has the ability to do that. Now, that's just a real simple example of the actual functionality there. But there are thousands of other fixes in there that the ACT will do, and then it will actually give you the ability to push those fixes out to all of your systems also. Another piece that really comes in, and the point of this slide here, as you can see, I called it the Acronym Paradise, is there's a lot of different tools out there. There's a lot of different things to know. So you really have to go do your research. So just like researching all the different features in Windows itself, you really need to go out and research all of the different pieces and components that go into actually deploying Windows 7, and then after the fact, operating it right. You don't want to leave that piece out, because once you get it out there, you want to make sure that you can maintain it. There's some kind of unsubstantiated statements out there about Windows 8, but that's way down the line for most folks. At least 2-3 years, right? So you're definitely going to have to manage Windows 7 today and beyond today. So making sure that you know how to do all those kind of things is definitely important, and getting a partner involved. Let's see here. So let's see here. I had a question here real quick going back to ACT. If we have the application list, can we import it into the ACT tool to check the compatibility? I think there is a method. I haven't done that before, but I think there is a method to go through and search the database also in ACT and figure out and get the actual information, because essentially it's just a lookup, right, as far as what the vendor has said and what other folks have said. So I do think that is in there, but I'm not positive on that one. So going back to this real quick, right, there's just so much to know. Get someone else involved, get a partner involved, so it's, kind of the quick sales pitch right there. Or at least go out and do your research. There's tons of information on this on the web, and there are lots and lots of folks that are out there doing these kind of things. It's not a simple process at all. Like I said, I can't even begin to scratch the surface here, and that's really me rambling on even right now for 25 minutes. But the key takeaways from everything above, right, is those two free tools. They're huge. They're important. And going back to that earlier question, I think I actually misspoke as far as the map tool in 5.0. It's the application compatibility toolkit that's at 5.6. I don't remember what the map tool version is at, but that's easy to look up. You can go out and look that up on the web on Microsoft's site and get that real quickly. But definitely take advantage of those tools. They're free. There's a lot of information in them, and there's some really good webcasts out there about them. So there's a site called TechNet Edge. It's a Microsoft site, and it's essentially all videos. And I know there's an excellent video out there on ACT. So you go to technetedge.com, and you can search for ACT, and you'll find some. I know there's at least one great walkthrough video. It's like 25 minutes of a person actually walking through using ACT in a real environment and getting all those details down. And on the same lines, right, if you've looked at any of the research from Gartner, Forrester, ITC, any of those folks, and they list about their top Windows 7 things, MapCompat is always number one. And you have to have a handle on that before you can even think about rolling the enterprise or anyone in your organization to Windows 7. If that one critical application is broken because of application compatibility, that's going to come back on you. So you got to make sure you do those things up front. Automating the deployment is huge, right? We don't want to rely on SneakerNet. We don't want to rely on moving disks around. We don't want to rely on having any manual input or relying on people. So all of these tools that Microsoft has for deploying Windows, they all are centric on automating everything, including building your reference images. Right? At the end of the day, if you're manually doing something more than once, right, you're probably doing it wrong. I tease about automating things, and if you're not automating things, you kind of have to scratch your head a little bit why you're in IT. And that includes our own processes, right? It's not just the business processes that we're there to automate. We're there to automate our own processes. One of the things that does is it eliminates human mistakes. It allows you to delegate it to other people now. And now you can take that vacation and you don't get that call. Or if you do get that call, you can just say, hey, go run this script and it'll do it for you, right? It's completely automated. So automation is huge. There's always upfront work with automation, but at the end of the day, it always pays and is well worth taking the time to do that upfront stuff. The research, I definitely think I hit that a few times, but make sure that you know what your decisions are. Make sure you know why Microsoft did things. A quick side story there. There was a forum post the other day that I was dealing with someone, and they were wondering how to. There's a new feature in Windows 7 for services that set them as delayed start. And they were wondering how to turn off the delayed start. They just wanted this specific service to automatically start and not delayed start. And my question to him was, why, right? Microsoft designed it to be delayed start for a specific reason. I mean, they know their product best from a technical standpoint. So why are you trying to circumvent what they put in? It's still starting. It's not like it's not starting. And he didn't have an answer for that, right? And that's exactly what I'm talking about. You don't just do things because you think it's the best. Go figure out why they're like that. And make decisions based upon that. And at the end of the day, if you come to that conclusion, great. But at least you've gone through your due diligence to figure it out. Going back to Windows 7, it's huge. It's different. Most of us have had it on our home computers, hopefully, for a little while now. And that's kind of the same with users, too. So they're a little bit used to certain things. So they may be used to some of the looks. There's so many new things. That one slide I threw up of all the different major features that are there. There's just so many new things you have to take account of, and the users are going to call you on some of these kind of things. Additionally, there's a lot of new functionality you can take advantage of to make your users' life easy. And if you don't know it's there, then you don't know to even implement it. So go research all those new things like BitLocker, things like direct access, app locker. They'll make your users' life easier, and hopefully they'll make your life easier, because really at the end of the day, that's the most important thing, at least in my opinion. And then testing. You can't go and say that one enough. Just like, you get that application from that vendor and you find that egregious bug that you can't believe is just staring you in the face and that they didn't fix. Kind of the same thing here, right? If your user gets that desktop plopped down in front of them and you haven't gone through the due diligence of testing all of those little things, and they see this egregious thing, in their eyes, you've just gone down. And that's, a traditional rub in most organizations is people not liking their IT organization, not wanting to call the help desk because they don't think that they're actually going to get helped. And then, of course, that just becomes this downward spiral. So make sure you're testing. Make sure you're getting those users involved with the testing, right? There's nothing to say that you have to do all that testing. Get those focus groups together. Those same folks that gave you the input up front, make sure they're the ones who are signing off on things. Get the buy-in from the business in addition to your internal folks. It's huge, right? I think I could probably go on for at least another couple hours here. But in the interest of time and my time allotment, that's pretty much what I have. I know there's a couple of follow-on webcasts, and the folks are going to go into some other new things, some other tips and tricks, some virtualization of Windows 7, which is really cool. The VDI stuff is really starting to get some foothold and some traction in a lot of organizations. And I just encourage you guys to go do some more research on your own, like I said, because there's just so many things that are out there. I definitely thank you all for your time today. Please feel free to get in touch with us. I don't have my email address up there, but I think in the invite there was contact information. And we'd love to come out and talk to anybody, whether it just be in a quick meeting or in a full-on engagement. And now is a great time for any additional questions. Oh, and I just got a note here also. It's all got recorded, so everyone should get a recording of it also. So if there's anything that I cruised by that piqued your interest, or maybe you wanted some more information on, or just maybe for the notes in the slide deck, then you'll definitely get the recording also. So like I said, great time for more questions. And if not, thank you. Y'all have a good day and a weekend that starts tomorrow.